The tool is called Rufus. You can download it right now from Rufus, i.e., it is free, it is open source, it weighs approximately 9 to 2 megabytes, one single executable file, no installation required, no Microsoft account, no subscription. And it has become the most effective challenge to Microsoft's Windows 11 hardware gatekeeping that has ever existed, not because it hacks anything, not because it exploits a security vulnerability, but because it simply does what Microsoft has officially refused to do. Let people install Windows 11 on the computers they already own. Microsoft said, you need a TPM2 zero chip. Rufus says, would you like to skip that? Microsoft said, you need an 8th generation Intel CPU or an AMD Ryzen 2000 series processor. Rufus says, would you like to skip that too? Microsoft said, you need a Microsoft account to set up Windows 11 Home. Rufus says, would you like to use a local account instead? 3 choices, 3 dialogues, 1 checkbox each, and the machine that Microsoft declared incompatible boots into Windows 11. The community that has discovered this has a word for it. They call it the Windows tax bypass, because every one of those requirements was, on some level, a policy decision more than a technical necessity. And a two-member tool written by a single developer named Pete Bittard has made that policy decision optional. Rufus's original purpose has nothing to do with bypassing Windows requirements. It is a bootable USB creator. You give it an ISO file and a USB drive, and it produces a bootable USB that you can use to install an operating system. This is something you could previously do with Microsoft's own media creation tool, but Rufus is faster, supports more image formats, and has more options. The Windows 11 bypass functionality was added when Microsoft announced the hardware requirements, and the community immediately began asking how to install Windows 11 on machines that technically ran it fine, but failed the TPM2 zero check. Pete Bittard added a set of options to Rufus that modify the Windows 11 installer image during USB creation to remove the checks that would normally block installation on non-compliant hardware. The modifications Rufus makes are not new in 2026. They are documented. They are achieved by editing a small file called the Windows Image Answer file and a registry key that the installer checks during setup. Microsoft's own engineers are aware of exactly how these bypasses work. They are not obscure tricks. They are publicly documented approaches that any competent Windows administrator could replicate manually. What Rufus does is make those approaches available to anyone who can click a checkbox. The latest version of Rufus, as of mid-2026, continues to work on Windows 11 25.8.2. The current version Microsoft is pushing to all consumer machines. The developer confirmed this specifically. And because Rufus is open source under the GPL license, even if Microsoft somehow legally pressured Pete Bittard to remove the features, the code is public and anyone could fork and maintain it. Microsoft cannot close this door without redesigning Windows 11's installation architecture from scratch. And redesigning it would also break the legitimate enterprise IT workflows that rely on the same customization mechanisms Rufus uses. The question this video's title raises is what Microsoft refused to do. The honest answer requires understanding what was actually possible. The machines that Windows 11's hardware requirements exclude are not broken. The Trusted Platform Module requirement that blocks most pre-2016 hardware is a security feature that provides specific capabilities, protecting the BitLocker encryption keys, enabling Windows Hello biometric authentication, and providing verified boot attestation. These are real benefits that justify the requirement on new hardware. But Microsoft made the requirement absolute. A machine without TPM2 zero cannot install Windows 11 through the official path. Period. Regardless of whether the user wants BitLocker, regardless of whether the user cares about Windows Hello, regardless of whether the user's actual use case would benefit from any of the TPM-dependent features in any measurable way. What Microsoft refused to do is offer a supported, documented path for users who understand the trade-offs and want to install Windows 11 on their TPM-less hardware anyway. The supported path that would have been reasonable, an official option during installation that says, clearly, your hardware does not meet the recommended specifications, these features will not be available, do you want to continue? And let the user decide. Microsoft chose not to offer that option. They chose a hard block, and Rufus chose to remove the block without Microsoft's permission. The argument Microsoft makes is that running Windows 11 on unsupported hardware produces a degraded experience, and that users who do so are at risk of problems Microsoft cannot support. This is legitimate. The counterargument that the community has made consistently is that running unsupported Windows 11 with Rufus is still better than running unsupported Windows 10 after October 2025, and that the user should be allowed to make that trade-off calculation themselves. Microsoft's response to Rufus has been studied silence. The company has not sent legal threats. It has not publicly condemned the tool. It has released Windows Update patches that occasionally re-enable some checks that Rufus bypasses, and Rufus's developer has updated the tool to address those patches. The cycle continues without escalation. The numbers around Rufus's adoption are genuinely striking for a tool maintained by one developer. Rufus has accumulated over 1.4 billion downloads since its creation. That is not the number of Windows 11 bypass installs specifically. Rufus's core use case of bootable USB creation predates the Windows 11 bypass by years and accounts for most of those downloads. But it is a measure of how embedded Rufus has become in the computing workflow of people who do their own system administration. In the period since Windows 10's October 2025 end of life, Rufus download numbers have accelerated. The tool appears in virtually every YouTube tutorial, Reddit thread, and tech blog post covering the question of what to do with a Windows 10 machine that cannot officially run Windows 11. The two main paths those guides recommend are Rufus for Windows 11 installation on unsupported hardware and Linux for users who prefer a free, maintained alternative. The fact that a single developer's open source tool is one of the two primary solutions being recommended for the largest forced operating system transition event in computing history is remarkable. Microsoft has thousands of engineers. It has billions of dollars. It chose a policy of hard hardware requirements and no official bypass path. A single developer with a 2MY executable filled the gap that policy created. The TPM bypass gets most of the attention when Rufus is discussed. The local account bypass matters as much for a different population of users. Windows 11 Home requires a Microsoft account during setup. There is no officially supported way to complete setup without one. The offline account creation path that existed in Windows 10 was removed. Various workarounds, fake email addresses, network disconnection at specific moments, have been progressively closed as Microsoft has updated the installer. Rufus's local account bypass works differently from the workarounds that get patched. It modifies the answer file that Windows Setup reads during installation to pre-configure a local account, bypassing the account creation prompt entirely. Because it operates at the image level rather than during live setup, it is more robust against the targeted patches Microsoft has applied to close interactive workarounds. The population this matters to is significant. Users who do not want a Microsoft account are not primarily privacy extremists. They are ordinary people who have had Microsoft accounts get locked, who do not want their desktop's file access linked to a cloud service, who object to Microsoft's telemetry collection that links behavior to a named identity, or who simply prefer the computing model where their machine is theirs and does not require an ongoing relationship with a remote company to boot. These users have had that preference increasingly overridden by Microsoft's software decisions. Rufus is one of the few tools that gives it back without requiring any specialized knowledge beyond the ability to follow a tutorial and click a checkbox. The story of Rufus is also the story of Pete Betard, the developer who has maintained it since 2011. Betard is not a visible public figure in tech. He does not post viral Twitter threads. He does not speak at conferences. He has maintained a piece of software that has been downloaded over 1 billion times with minimal public profile. His response to the Windows 11 hardware requirements when he added the bypass features to Rufus was characteristically understated. He documented what the tool does. He noted which checks it bypasses and why. He pointed out that Microsoft's own documentation acknowledges that Windows 11 can run on unsupported hardware, and that the issues are Microsoft's stated reasons for the requirement, not a technical impossibility. The legal question of whether Rufus's bypass functionality is permissible has never been definitively tested. Microsoft could argue that the bypass circumvents technical protection measures in ways that implicate the DMCA. Betard's counterargument, implicit in the tool's design, is that he is modifying an installer image the user legitimately purchased. To install software the user legitimately owns a license for, on hardware the user legitimately owns. The bypass is not piracy assistance. It requires a genuine Windows 11 ISO from Microsoft's own servers. Microsoft has chosen not to pursue this legal argument. The most likely reason is the same reason Microsoft does not aggressively pursue the other Windows 11 hardware bypass methods that are publicly documented. The legal and PR cost of targeting a well-regarded open-source developer and his users would exceed any benefit from enforcing a policy that is transparently about hardware partner relationships rather than security necessity. 90 days from now, the consumer extended security updates for Windows 10 expire. The machines that cannot officially run Windows 11 face their final deadline. Rufus provides a third option for those users that is neither paying for new hardware nor switching to Linux. Install Windows 11 anyway, on the machine that Microsoft said was incompatible, using a 2MB tool that has bypassed all the checks standing in the way. This option has costs. Microsoft officially does not support Windows 11 on unsupported hardware. Updates may occasionally fail. Specific features dependent on TPM, BitLocker, Windows Hello may not be available. Microsoft has reserved the right to withdraw the option entirely at any time through a future Windows update that more aggressively enforces hardware requirements. But for a user who wants to stay on Windows, who cannot afford new hardware in 2026's price environment, and who is comfortable with the trade-offs, Rufus makes Windows 11 installation a 45-minute process on hardware that is 5 years old. Microsoft refused to provide that path officially. A single developer provided it anyway, and millions of people have already used it. The window between now and October 13th, 2026 is when that use accelerates. Every user who discovers that their machine cannot officially run Windows 11 and goes looking for alternatives will find Rufus in the second paragraph of every guide, every tutorial, every forum thread covering their situation. Some of those users will use it to install Windows 11. Some of them will look at Rufus's menu of options. Bypass TPM, bypass secure boot, bypass RAM check, remove Microsoft account requirement, disable data collection, and decide that an operating system that requires a third-party tool to be used the way they want to use it is an operating system they are done with. Both outcomes are real. Both are happening. And both would not be happening without the 2NLW file at Rufus, i.e. that one developer has been maintaining for 15 years. Microsoft built a door. It decided the door needed a lock that excluded 250 million users. It refused to provide a key. An open source developer made one, gave it away for free, and 1 billion people downloaded it. That is what happened. And it is too late to unhappen it.